Now, in reaction to authoritarianism, as will often be the case when you have critical thinking taking place, we have the emergence of a second philosophy. The second philosophy being libertarianism. Libertarianism, a very friendly philosophy we think of, and there's no mistake about it. Libertarianism is the philosophy that is most widely adopted in the United States, especially in the formation of the media. Libertarianism swung to the other side of authoritarianism by saying the individual is responsible for their own destiny, and that the individual has a responsibility to engage in civic participation. That means participating in the affairs of society. And in fact, if you look at one of the mission statements of the Department of Communication here at ESU, we're asking for civic participation from our students. We even have a concentration called Public Communication and Advocacy, which is all about that, is getting involved in the affairs of your community, in the affairs of your region, in the affairs of your state, in the affairs of your nation. And so that's a very big plank that's a part of the libertarian philosophy. And the root of it is very suspicious of government, libertarian philosophy. And we have that in the United States, right? Very suspicious. It starts with throwing all that tea into Boston Harbor because we didn't like the taxation from the British. And we've always been suspicious of the government. We don't even like to hear that the government's going to get involved, generally speaking, no matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or something else. In a libertarian system, the media are also privately owned, except in the libertarian system, it's open to a free marketplace, which has to do with the exchange of goods and services and the introduction of currency to facilitate the exchange of goods and services based on supply and demand. That's what a marketplace is. And so in a private context, within a demand and supply economy, you have the rise of capitalism and profit making. Profit making, in other words, is very friendly also to libertarianism. So profit making sort of opens itself up within libertarianism. In libertarianism, you have a lot of rewards and punishments that are being used to incentivize whether media content is going to go in one direction versus another direction. The rewards include gaining a big audience and then being able to charge more to advertisers and then being able to acquire capital and stock and investors. Those are the rewards. The punishments are more along the lines of going out of business, being snuffed out by the competitors, being fined by the government, ideas not taking off. That's a system that's designed to guide policy making in a libertarian system. Also in the libertarian system, though, you do have a role for government. The government is sort of standing by just in case people are acting illegally. If a media company, for example, is selling media product without having paid for that product, if it stole the idea from somebody, that is a finable offense, according to this philosophy, the libertarian philosophy. Now let's move on to another swing against against a philosophy, I should say, moving to the third legacy philosophy, which is communism. Communism, now we're back to a dirty word. Nobody thinks of communism as a good thing, even though most people in this country, including probably every single person in this class, well, maybe not every single person, but I would say maybe one person in the class has met a communist. I would say the rest of you have never met a communist, but you have an opinion about communists and communism, right? That's how embedded it is in our ideology as we filter it through the American media system. Let's explore what the communist philosophy is when it's applied to media. It's all about the state being a caretaker. It's the state, the government combined with society is taking care of people. That's its main role in a communist society. And so part of that role is to achieve egalitarianism, to make sure that nobody is so rich, so filthy rich, while at the same time you have somebody living in a crack house with broken windows, or somebody else living in a shopping cart, or somebody else like the guy down here on Brown Street living behind the bridge. I'm pointing, he can't see me pointing, going down over the bridge, walking down to Walmart if that's where you're walking. You don't have those huge gaps theoretically in a communist society. You're trying to achieve egalitarianism, and the idea is that if individuals work together as a whole, rather than this is for me, I'm for me, the idea of private property, the idea of you have to fix your own sidewalk as a homeowner, those ideas are not present in communism. It's about everybody's working together to achieve the whole. So the government is going to fix those sidewalks. The government's going to make sure that nobody is homeless. In a communist system, you do have the state owning the media. The media are owned by the state. Chinese media are owned by the Chinese government, owned by the Chinese political party. And the reason for that is to control to make sure that there is no dissension, to make sure that there is no criticism that causes a fracturing of the only legitimate political party. In communism, you only have one legitimate party. So why have two? Why have Democrats and Republicans when there is only one legitimate party? That's the thinking behind communism. It's the idea that the media are there to serve the state like they are in authoritarianism, but also to teach doctrine, to teach Chinese communist doctrine. And a big part of that doctrine, which gets left out of capitalist critiques of communism, a big part of that doctrine is to have the media elevate the tastes of the public, to not just serve as a Kardashian cesspool of bringing people down into random gossip and getting them interested in really fake values like plastic surgery and arguing over things that don't really matter. Okay, I'm lampooning the Kardashians right now. I'm not meaning to say that. What I'm meaning to say is I'm trying to show how communism provides another way of looking at that, and it says we need to elevate public taste. So in communist media doctrine, you actually have government that are making it a requirement for media to carry opera and ballet and symphony and fine arts to elevate those public tastes and not drag them down into a kind of disarray and chaos born out of competition and vanity and gossip. Yeah, those are my own sort of slight turns on it. And a good example of this was when I was in China. When I was in China, every morning I'd wake up in my dormitory getting ready to teach this very class, and I'd hear around 9:30, if I recall, hee ha hoo ah, hee ha hoo ah. That's what it sounded like to me anyhow. So I said, I've got to figure out what this is. I bet it has something to do with the Chinese military. I mean, I've been taught my whole life through American media that the Chinese are going to be our greatest competitor, and they have this military that's just like a sleeping giant waiting to be awakened. So I got to go check it out. I went outside and I saw these speakers every few yards along the sidewalk, like audio speakers, and that's where the sound was coming out of. So I followed along, and I was more certain than ever that this was communist indoctrination. It was propaganda to get people, riled up against the United States. And I went back to the front desk. I asked them about it, and they said, "Oh no, that's the exercise lady." The exercise lady? Who's the exercise lady? Oh yeah, every morning she gives coaching so that people can do sit-ups and push-ups and running in place so that we can have a healthy society. I said, oh my God, I can't believe the government's paying for that. Speakers all over campus. So I went to have a discussion with students. I said, aren't you concerned that the government is controlling your lives and the government is not letting you have access to Facebook and that you're just following along? And their answer by and large was, oh no, because the government has our best interests in mind, and our parents have our best interests in mind, and they are more wise. They are more wise, so we should listen to them, and they have provided for us, and they're the ones who brought us into the world. This is communist indoctrination. It's looking at it not necessarily from a capitalistic viewpoint, but I'm trying to get at it from within communist philosophy. Now we're going to move on to a fourth legacy philosophy, the philosophy that actually was born in the United States but was adopted most widely in Europe. And that's the social responsibility philosophy. The social responsibility philosophy also grew out of a time period right after World War II when Siebert, Peterson, and Schramm were writing their landmark theoretical work. Social responsibility theory was born out of a professor out of the University of Chicago, and this professor decided that he was going to put together a group, a commission, his name was Hutchins, he called it Hutchins Commission, to study media, because right after World War II, the world went into a giant Cold War, where there was a standoff between the Soviet Union and the United States, where both compiled these nuclear weapons, and there was no talking, and the systems were so different. It was a scary time period. I lived during that in the 70s. So the idea was, let's look at the media and see what's going on. And if you go to a theater in the late 1940s and you're waiting for your film, you might see a trailer, and the trailer was, "Kill a Jap today." You heard right, kill a Jap today. Yeah, as if all Japanese people should be killed because of the Japanese military that bombed Pearl Harbor. So Hutchins and his crew said this is just creating cynicism in the public. It's getting people to hate others when no real information has been provided. So media need to have a different way of operating. We're going to demand that media recognize that they have a privileged position in society. They get to make all this money. They have access to thousands and millions of people. They're much closer to government than we are, to government officials. They have a privileged position. Therefore, they have to be responsible in that position. They have a social responsibility. They have a social responsibility to be mostly factual and if they're going to be opinionated, to have a balance of opinions. Now, you can achieve that balance within a particular news program where you have two sides, or you can have like a cable channel where if you look at the broad spectrum of it, you have a balance between, just to pick politics, conservative shows and liberal shows. It's about balance. That's what the social media responsibility philosophy is saying. And government does have a role. Government's like a referee. The sports analogy is used here. The government is a referee. The rules are set by government, and the players and the teams go at it, and as long as they play by the rules, no problem. But as soon as somebody has pass interference, out steps the government, throwing a yellow flag onto the field. Penalty, you pay this fine, now we move along. And by the way, if we think that media are up to no good, like advertising vaping, for example, or going after children with advertising, or falsely accusing others of crimes that they did not commit, then we're going to have a different situation where the government is going to get involved and is going to throw that yellow flag and say, out of bounds for your media. That's not acceptable. We're going to take control. And to avoid that, what we're going to do is we're going to use the government as a bully pulpit. We're going to have senators and presidents and others threatening to pass legislation to control the media if the media don't get its act together on their own. So the media are given the first chance in a social responsibility philosophy situation, and media, as you might guess, are privately owned. We don't want the government owning media, but we want the government regulating media with regulating agencies to stand by. All right, so that wraps up the legacy philosophies. Now we're going to move to the newer philosophies, the first one of which is a developmental philosophy. And this arises in developing countries. That's where the philosophy comes from. We're talking about your Ghanas, we're talking about your Mexicos, we're talking about your Ecuadors, we're talking about your Cambodias, we're talking about countries that are struggling to achieve self-sufficiency for whatever reason. It could be because they are susceptible to hurricanes all the time, like Puerto Rico. It could be because they have disease or pestilence, or they're subjected to poor seasons in terms of being able to grow crops, like Ethiopia. It could be that the countries have undergone years of civil strife, like Lebanon or Rwanda. It could be that there are hostile countries surrounding a smaller country that feels threatened, like Lebanon is threatened by Iran and Syria. So there are lots of reasons that countries, particularly smaller ones, are still developing and having a hard time with self-sustaining themselves. And the idea in a developmental philosophy is that those countries need the media to be built up and to be self-sustaining. But at the same time, the media need the government. The media can't just grow up on its own. The media need the government. How do they need each other? The government needs media to provide positive coverage where positive news is warranted. The government needs the media to spread information, particularly to eradicate illiteracy when a population can't read, or to eradicate disease. Diseases like polio still exist in parts of the world, even though here in the United States we've eradicated that because of vaccination. About information about hygiene, how to care for yourself, deodorant and cleaning yourself, and those kinds of things are not necessarily present in tribal societies. Not that tribal societies are backwards. I think in many ways tribal societies are more advanced. Commentary there. But at any rate, I hope you see my point here that the government needs the media, but at the same time the media need the government. The media, you have to have trained professionals. You can't just go be a TV reporter. So you need the government to provide an educational system. You need the government to provide funding in terms of loans or outright grants to fund the equipment build out for a TV station or a cable network or internet infrastructure or 5G bandwidth on a wireless cell phone network. You need the government supporting media. You need the government also being accessible to media. You need to open up with press conferences and provide transparency and access to financial data. And in many cases where countries have had war and have had really corrupt governments where thousands of people have been killed in the name of political revolutions, you need a law that guarantees press freedom. You've got to have that law, otherwise the press are going to be threatened all the time. When I was in Ghana, I went to a radio station. He said, the on-air disc jockey said, "I wish you could have been here 8 years ago." I said, "Why?" He said, "You would have seen that every time I did my radio show, a military official with a gun just sat there in the corner. He never said anything. He just sat there." the implication is obvious, right? One wrong move and you're being hauled away. That's the way that Ghana was. So in those countries, the press have to be guaranteed by law freedom. Which takes us to our final philosophy. The final philosophy has grown up because of technology. The final philosophy has grown up because of the internet and because of YouTube and Facebook and all the other ways that people can express themselves individually. The final philosophy is called democratic participant philosophy. Democratic participant. It does have a bias that this philosophy is needed because it's going to help democracy. The bias being that democracy is good. The idea is that a democracy does not function when you only have the rich and the powerful who are making decisions and influencing others. That if you want to have a true democracy, you need to have citizens involved. And they need to participate. And they can today. In the past, if you wanted to get on television, good luck. You need an agent, you need to be famous, you need to be unbelievably handsome or beautiful, or already famous because a member of your family is famous. Those are your chances to get on television. Not very accessible, and yet television is carrying a lot of news, a lot of information, and a lot of cultural symbols being passed down through television. And so the democratic participation philosophy says that's not right. But guess what? We don't need TV anymore. We've got YouTube. We've got Stitch, we've got Facebook Live, we've got Twitter, we've got Instagram all over college campuses, Snapchat, and all the rest of them. The internet allows people like me right now making a video, distributing this video is going to sit on YouTube. People can watch it from all over the world. You don't have to be an ESU student. That is the democratic participant theory. And it's even texting, the ability to text as well. It's basically the access to media content and the creation of and distribution of that content has been opened up to the average everyday citizen, and is necessary to democracy. That's what democracy depends on. It depends on people who were previously disenfranchised, ethnicities, poor people, elderly people, people who are not religious, those are disenfranchised people. Bring them in. We need them in democracy. And so we have citizen groups that rise up, that pressure governments, to make sure that governments open themselves up to the average everyday citizen having a voice, and one of the methods of that is through media. And the media that are encouraged and are expected to be funded in a democratic participation philosophy are alternative startup media properties. Alternative startups, small. Don't just let the big Facebooks always be the only ones who can distribute media on a social media platform. Let startups also have that chance. After all, Facebook was once a startup. It was once an audio intercom system in a dentist's office of Mark Zuckerberg's father. That's what we're talking about. It was an alternative startup. We need to keep that cycle going all the time so that the average everyday citizen, which Mark Zuckerberg used to be one, he's not anymore, the average everyday citizen has that role. So all of these philosophies should be on your mind when you think about the country that you're examining in this class, and you're researching this philosophy. You're researching this country today, trying to decide which of these philosophies apply. You can choose one, you can choose two, you can blend three. Of course, you have that word length. You can start to develop your own philosophy. You are a graduate student. You're developing your own thinking in this class. That's perfectly fine. Keep in mind that these philosophies are not meant to be evaluative. They're not to say that countries that follow an authoritarian philosophy are all bad and the ones that are following libertarian are all good. No, these are supposed to be value neutral. That was the big criticism, the Siebert, Peterson, and Schramm book, that it was basically using an American and Western framework to say that communist media were bad. But we can pick and choose the good things, right? We can pick and choose the good things, and that's what you do in a non-evaluative framework of analyzing media using these philosophies. I hope you have fun with it. Have a great day.